Aloha. Today I wanted to expand off the last videos and kind of just go naturally where I'm guided to go in speaking about what I've been speaking about. Excuse me. This video I wanted to focus mostly on what Trump actually represents. When I watch all these Alex Jones videos and these TYT videos to keep up on how the story is being told outside of the mainstream media and within the mainstream media, I'm realizing that the people that are for Trump, and there's a lot more people coming out of the woodworks that are for Trump. A lot of these so-called conspiracy people are they're showing their faces of what they really represent or what they're really standing for. And when that happens, then you really see all the stuff that they had talked about before, all the stuff that they had so-called revealed before. It really doesn't matter because, like I said in the past, it's not so much about what you are saying is bad. Like, you can say, like, how much shit has Alex Jones said that is bad? That's like what he's against. It's not so much about what you're against, because everybody can be against the pedophile rings and the human trafficking and the GMOs and the fluoridated water. Everybody can be against that stuff. That's obvious. But what you really see about an individual is when they come out what they are for. When they come out what they are for, then that's when you see where their consciousness really lies. Because everybody can get on the team of, you know, this is the bad guy and so we are the good guys, but you really don't see the entire the 360 version of the individual until they start to talk about what they are for, how far they are willing to go to challenge what it is that they are against. Trump represents dominance. He represents a powerful European white man. And I'm just going to use these terms. You guys already know how I feel about labels and terminologies and so on and so forth. But I'm going to use these words to represent, just to go with the flow, to flow with it so I don't have to keep going back and forth. Trump represents a strong white man. That is what they are presenting to the populace. They are presenting someone who speaks it real, who keeps it real, someone who can get the job done, someone who doesn't mince words, somebody who can do all this stuff. He created an empire. All of that mentality. See, also all those people who are for Trump and all this shit, you can see that this is what this is how far they're going. Trump represents ignorance. He represents a limited version of history. He represents paid slavery. Literally, he's been known to not pay people. Literally, he's been known to take advantage of the system and take advantage of people. All this stuff exists within the colonial program. His representation represents ignorance within the slave program to keep everybody no different than politics, like Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton and so on and so forth. The main thing, which I'll get into in a second, Trump represents is the whipping post. Trump represents you shutting down your ability to think outside of the box and to just submit to the dominating force of the colonial power, the colonial program, the colonial history. Now, I mentioned this a lot in previous videos, but I really want to, with this video, I really want to share how I feel when I reference the colonial program. This is just a preview of the depths of how I feel about what the colonial program represents. This ignorance is not a little thing. To keep people ignorant of history is not a little thing. You are separating people from their ancestors. You are separating people from nature, separating people from their soul essence, separating people from spirit. This is all well known in the university system. It's all well known with the inherently atheist university system. It's all well known across the earth plane when you see the conquering of people, the destruction of people, the separating of people from their natural being, their connections to who and what they are, the invention of the terminology like African American, when we already know that the melanated people were already across the earth plane before Europeans started traveling anywhere. To create that mentality, to call you black and to call that other person white, is to make you, black is bad. Black is second when you're playing chess. White always moves first. White always is about dominance, dominating the mentality. Trump represents the colonial daddy that has to come in and take charge and run things the way they've always wanted to run this system. The so-called, they wanted to run this system like a business openly. They've been running this thing as a business underhandedly before Donald Trump. They've been running it with like a business with the lobbyists, calling the lobbyists separate from the politicians. Bullshit. They are there to make it look like they are not a part of the politicians. So you can believe that the politicians are still a part of you. The politicians never represented you. They always represented the bankers. And the lobbyists are only there to make it look like the politicians are the good guys and the bankers and the lobbyists and the people who represent money are the bad guys. So this is all a big fucking game. It's all a big farce. Donald Trump represents what the system has been wanting to do forever. They want to have a dominating banker, business-minded individual to run this system. This is what he represents. And what he represents is also in relation to what Obama represents. Obama, in his whole 8 years in presidency, he represents the slave mind, the puppet who just played the game. He represented, at the time when he was inaugurated, he represented change. He represented hope. He represented the real America, the diversity of America. That's what the program, that's what the commercial was telling you. They were telling you to think like that. But the inherent energy that was involved in electing a so-called first black president was to get the people to shut the fuck up. Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. Stop talking about George Bush and how stupid and how ridiculous he is, because he made money for us. He made us go to war with his stupidity. He made us go to Iraq and kill Saddam Hussein and take over all over the, like, set up Syria and set up Libya and all that whole shit. He set that all up. So shut up and just watch this puppet do exactly what we tell him to do for 8 years, and you don't have a fucking chance in hell of getting out of this system. You're a fucking slave. You don't know who the fuck you are. You're just an African American, whatever the fuck we tell you are. You're just a color. You're just black. You're nothing. You're a piece of shit. You're less than a piece of shit. You're less than an animal. In fact, you're a monkey, because we tell you that Darwinism exists and evolution exists and the globe model exists and the university program exists. Everything about your fucking reality has been given to you by us. So shut your mouth and be dominated by us. And look, here's your first fucking black president. But he's not even black anymore. That has no meaning. He's just going to do whatever the fuck we tell him to do. And he's going to make it even worse than your so-called stupid George Bush president, who was so-called a part of the establishment and so forth. Obama represents that weak ass sellout black man. He represents that weak ass establishment shit. And Trump represents the so-called outsider, dominating. He's like a powerful, he's strong. This is what Alex Jones's team and all these people who are all these so-called conspiracy theorists are talking about, the positives of Donald Trump. Now that they have no fucking other choice, now that he's in there, they got to back it up. So they're like, yeah, he tells it like it is. He's going to be different. He's not going to be part of the establishment. Whatever the hell he is, it doesn't matter. Even if they take him out and put somebody else in, it doesn't fucking matter. They're not going to go into the depths of the colonial program as a whole. This shit is a psychological warfare. It's a spiritual warfare. It goes into your very connections to your family, your brothers and sisters, your mother and father, your relationships to nature, your relationships to the ancestors, your relationship to the self, your soul, your relationships to every single thing that you wake up in the morning, even your relationships to your dreams. This is about making you, dominating you. If they dominate your body, which is what slavery represented, which is what bombing and biochemical warfare represented, what the military and prison industrial complex represents, if they dominated your body and still are dominating your body, that's only because they have first dominated your psychology. They've dominated your mind. And they've only been able to dominate your mind to make you believe that you're a slave, to make you believe that you're an African American, to make you believe that you're just a color, an empty monkey mind evolution reality, because they initially dominated your spirit, your soul, your connection to nature. This is obvious when they called the indigenous people primitive and savage. It's a Stockholm syndrome, making you believe, making you love this shit. So when people are still celebrating Christmas and Thanksgiving and Columbus Day and Veterans Day and fucking 4th of July and Easter and all this shit, not to mention the fact that your very calendar is created by this colonial system. Your time is created by this colonial system. The word hours is an anagram for Horus, an ancient Egyptian principle. See, this is that whole fucking thing that they put it on you when they say, oh yeah, those primitive savage people just worshipped many gods and all this other shit. It's like, no, fuck that. Stop talking about that like we didn't know what the fuck the balances of nature were back in the day. It's not about this simple ass understanding like they sell to you about God and all this shit. The ancient Egyptians' representations with all those so-called gods like Horus and Thoth and Jehudi and all the Ra and so on and so forth. These represented principles. They represented energy. It was the God-like energy, principle energy that exists in the reality, in the experience, in the maximum capabilities of who and what you are. When they saw that, and when the so-called the colonial program wanted to dominate everybody, everything had to be watered down. So it wasn't so much a flood of just water and all that shit. This is what we are experiencing today, is a flood of ignorance. A flood of information that is just fucking garbage and untrue. And that's what the foundations of the colonial system are built on top of that ignorance, on top of that garbage, illusory foundation. And that foundation is worshipped today. That foundation is protected by your love for Christmas and all these all these colonial programs that are set up for you, your love for your forefathers that they tell you that they etched into the Native American Mount Rushmore mountain. They created this constitution that's based upon the Iroquois Confederacy. First of all, stolen. Everything is fucking stolen. And they flipped it, reversed it, and sold it back to you as if they created it. And the manipulation of Hollywood and the music industry and everything that you experience and celebrate and dance to and cry and get married by and all this shit, all these diamond commercials, all these bacon commercials, all of this shit is fucking garbage. And it's for the spiritual warfare, the psychological warfare, to keep this shit going. And until you challenge the entire system, you will still be dominated by the system itself. This is what Donald Trump represents. He represents the ignorance on the ultimate spiritual warfare scale. The ignorance of realizing that there's an intention behind putting European people in a movie called The Gods of Egypt. There's an intention on making all these slave movies. There's an intention from the Jewish-run Hollywood system, the Jewish-run mainstream media, making movies after movie after movie about slavery, movie after movie about Hitler, and never talking about the Jewish engagement in the slave trade, never talking about the Aboriginal Americans, the so-called black people, never telling you your true essence in reality. Constantly keeping you in a separated mode of understanding, of understanding, of overstanding. Constantly. You can go all the way from the Big Bang. You can go from the Big Bang. You can go from the monkey evolution theory. You can go to Darwinism. Everything is about separating you from your reality, from your maximum potential. Every single thing. The university system is laced with this. The public is based on this. The public education system is based upon conformity. It's based upon telling you these stories, shutting down your children before they become adults who will be respected enough to challenge the entire system. This is what's happening right now. It's being revealed for what it is, and it's only new to some people because they have the internet and the ability to look at this information and teach and see how stupid this shit is. People are being only now calling this shit new, and they're creating this commercial revolution with your Alex Jones and your TYT, hoping that you'll buy in to this shallow ass version of challenging the system. This shallow ass version of addressing your reality. When George Bush was leaving office, we were on the brink of revolution because so many people were aware of the fact that we went into Iraq and into the that we were aware that the war on terrorism was so full of shit, that was so garbage. And then Obama came in and shifted the entire consciousness. You don't see that shit as on purpose? People still fucking believing in Obama and what the fuck he's gonna do. You don't think he knows he was meant to do that shit? He had to play that role. I don't give a fuck about whatever those people defend about him. He's a part of the system. He's a puppet. So if he's that, then what the fuck do you think Donald Trump is? Just because you think, we were all thinking that Donald Trump was in there to make you think that he was in there to make it look like he was there to be the fall guy for Hillary, the establishment, to be in the system. But it's actually reversed, how I'm seeing it now. He was in there against Hillary, and Hillary was actually there to represent the establishment, to make it look like Trump is not a part of this system. She was the biggest fucking establishment representative. She was there to represent the so-called globalists, to get this whole villain against this artificial revolution movie line going, to make it look like Trump is an outsider just because he's a businessman. No, he represents exactly what this system wants. Exactly what this system is. It's a fucking mafia. Excuse me. It's an international mafia. The colonial program is based upon dominance. And now that they got you dumbed down and sedated with your so-called first black president, and he didn't so-called do shit because he wasn't supposed to do anything. The president has no power. The system has no power. All of the power exists in the people. This is why when you say that, when you realize your actual leaders who were taken out, your Malcolm X, your Martin Luther King, your black people in the Black Panthers who were not compromised by the system, by the FBI, not the actual leaders, the essence of the system, the essence of the movement, to be able to challenge the entire fucking system from the ground up. When you place that against Obama, Obama looks like a fucking little mouse. He looks like a little weak ass piece of shit, zero spine, nothing. And Donald Trump represents this fat cat piece of shit that's part of the system. But since he was placed up against a Hillary Clinton, a known establishment globalist, so on and so forth, whatever representative, he looks like an outsider to people who are looking at the system from within the system. But when you go to the depths of why this system is doing what it is doing, based upon what it has already done, then you realize that he represents ignorance. For you not looking at your history, for you not empowering yourself, for you not being able to challenge the system, and simultaneously installing fear about how he is a loose cannon and he can just let loose anything. It doesn't fucking matter what you think he can do. The system is gonna do. They got plans out for 10 and 20 and 50 years. But all of those plans are in relation to the consciousness of the people. What people will accept. What people will be ignorant of. What they will allow to happen. How far they will allow the slavery to go. You can see the pressure relief valve of the civil rights movement was because inherent slavery, lynching, burning, blowing people up, their own people, wasn't going to be tolerated anymore because of the consciousness of the people. Empathy and compassion and understanding it manifested into this reality. And this system is adjusting to the people who are the last ones to adjust. The golden ages of our past are well known. It's easy to find this information. So why is this information being hidden? Because the dominating factor, the colonial program, the European psychology that controls the international enslavement program, excuse me, cannot be revealed for what it is. Trump represents that entire dominating factor of, we gave you your reality. And people fucking defend this shit, talking about like one guy telling me, oh, you mean to tell me you don't benefit from this system with technology and all this other shit? That is the mind control program. That is the hopeless slave mentality. You have nowhere else to go, no root structure, nothing to look at in your past, because your past is rooted in fucking destroying things, destroying people. That wound needs to be healed and looked at, not just by the melanated people, the indigenous and aboriginal people who are within this mind control program, but also within the so-called white people and European people. In fact, that's the leading reason why none of this shit will be understood, is because so-called white people, the people who benefit the most from this system outwardly. This is what white privilege actually is. Psychologically, white privilege really has nothing to do with your job and all this other stuff. When you realize the privilege of the psychological implications that happen when you are born into a system that is based on your enslavement, that is based upon killing you, that is based upon keeping you down, that is based upon the entire... See, that's just one side. The other side is the dominating factor when a so-called white person has to walk out of that door and they don't have to worry about shit. That's an entire life. Not saying, I'm taking it to the extreme. Of course you got to worry about something. But what I'm saying is that psychologically, internally, at the deepest root structure, when you realize that this program, this supremacy program is running rampant, when you realize that there's a British flag flying over the Polynesian islands right now. There's a British flag flying in New Zealand. The American flag ain't nothing but a British flag. The idea of America ain't even America. That's just the United States. And I even slip and say that shit sometimes. That mentality is a privilege. To call yourself America when South America is mostly black. It's all black and brown. But when you hear America, what do you think? Hot dogs, hamburgers, bacon double cheeseburgers, the 4th of July, white Hollywood, the government system, the red, white, and blue, cowboys, and all that other shit. That's a mentality. That is part of... That doesn't just exist in your just blurting out like America #1 without even considering the entirety of America. It exists in the psychology of having that as part of who and what you are based upon this synthetic system. See, when I'm talking about race and supremacy program, I'm talking about the synthetic system. But my origin, my essence is coming from the organic nature of humanity. But you can't tap into that essence until you realize the synthetic version of reality. So when people address me from, oh, you're talking about racist, you're just racist, all this other shit, keep that shit for you. That's for the birds. Keep that shit for yourself. I don't got time for that shit. I'm speaking in reference to the synthetic version of reality to help people see and be able to tap into, at least observe, aware the organic nature of humanity outside of this mind control program that has been manipulated by a particular version of thinking, a particular version of experiencing and relating to nature and the people around them, the people across the earth plane. This is what Trump represents, not looking at that shit. Not looking. So when people say, see, and people readily understand this shit when they say, oh, well, why don't you just get over it? Slavery, just get over it. That's done. We're in a new age now. This is about technology. Don't you love technology in your smartphone? We have to just get over the slavery and genocide and everything. That is the extreme mentality of the synthetic slave mind. And it's so rotten. This is why that's actually, if you really ask me, that's the essence of cancer. That's the essence of, because first cancer has to manifest in the psyche before it manifests in the body. And before it manifests in the mind, it has to manifest in the soul. So just for one moment, in this moment, imagine that the colonial program, the genocide and massacres, the university system as it is today, the mind control programs that are involved in the Trump program, imagine that shit never existed. Imagine that energy, that destructive, fucked up energy that exists in people today, so much today that they were willing to bleach their skin. They're willing to blonde their hair just so they can be accepted by their friends, so-called friends, accepted by their surroundings. Imagine that mentality and all the energy that added up to that system never existed. How different this place would be. How connected to nature and culture and your ancestors you would be if you weren't told to worship a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus. If you weren't told that your ancestors only came from Africa, that your ancestors were not primitive and savage, that what they were tapping into, the harmonics of nature, wasn't some demonic sort of out of touch with whatever you want to call it reality, but they were really tapped into something beautiful. Not saying that it was perfect. I'm saying that there's a positive and a negative side. And the way the religious conquests of Christianity and the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus of today is just to tell you that everything about that shit is just right. Everything is right. Nothing is wrong with it. And it's the savior of your entire reality. Get the fuck out of here with all that shit. How many other people, how many actual human beings who had their own fucking problems wrote that book? Not to take anything away from, not trying to take anything away from the biblical perspectives and the wisdom within that stuff. I'm talking about there's always some downsides to this shit. And if you just blindly accept something without looking at the 360-degree views of everything, then you're just going to walk into another fucking trap. Before we step off into any other kind of new worlds or anything, kind of new anything, you have to understand what the fuck happened before now. You have to understand what's happening right now. And this is what Trump represents. He represents you not looking at all the false flags of all the wars. You're not looking at the fact that the so-called colonial program has been playing every side of every war to profit off of war itself at the expense of you. Black, white, brown, whatever it is. It doesn't fucking matter when you go up to that far. But Trump represents you not even realizing that shit, not looking at it. Staying in that, don't you just love technology? Why don't you just get over it? Just get over it. Just make America great again and stop rocking the boat. Stop being controversial. Stop talking about, are you a racist? You must just be racist. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm talking about shit that actually existed. That nobody, that it's a little bit fucking suspect if you can't even talk about this shit without it being, in fact, if you talk about it, that's really suspect. If you talk about it and somebody's already got an emotional defense mechanism against it, it's not like your opinion. Slavery is not the opinion of so-called black people. Genocide is not the opinion of the Native Americans and the indigenous people all over the earth plane. The mind control program of a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus, when in that very book he's not even blonde-haired and blue-eyed, That's not a fucking opinion. There's a psychological intention behind that shit. It's a fucking fact. So why aren't those facts being recognized? Because it's easy to be ignorant. It's easy to just be a part of the status quo. It's easy to be sedated in your reality. It's easy to just go along with what your friends are telling you to go along with. It's easy to just be a part of the fucking system. It's difficult to actually step outside of those systems because you're vulnerable in every way. And the most difficult thing people have is to be vulnerable to themselves. To be vulnerable to hear yourself. Because once you start listening to nature, to the sound of nothing, to the sound of, that's when reality starts to creep in. And this is what reality and your history and your ancestors, your blood, your spirit starts to creep in. Trump represents a loud, consistent. This is why he's with Twitter. It's not a mistake that he's a Twitter fanatic. You think he's a fucking 70-year-old man on Twitter? You think that's a fucking coincidence? No. It's a constant mind control program to get people to think about shit within the box on a regular basis. And all he's got to do is type a few fucking sentences and he's got the entire system wrapped around his fucking finger. It's not a mistake. It's a triggering. It's like a cattle prod to keep the slave mind alive, to keep you focused on that. And so you won't challenge the system at all. In fact, you'll just play whatever the system tells you to play. Whether it's alternative news, whether it's so-called conspiracy theories, whether it's new age, whether it's religious programming, whether it's so-called intellectual programming from your Darwinist university system. Whatever it is, whatever your consciousness is comfortable with within that box. Because you're not comfortable with yourself. If everybody was comfortable with themselves, we'd be in harmony. We wouldn't be destroying shit. Because if we're comfortable with ourselves, truly, then we'd be comfortable with other people. This is why people don't have a lot of friends who are comfortable with themselves. Because they can't be themselves around other people who are comfortable with being something and somebody else. And the more you are of yourself around people who are constantly trying to be something or somebody else, it makes them have to look at themselves. So you inherently bring that silence with your presence to their reality. And that's uncomfortable. That makes them vulnerable. People don't want to talk about realness and all this other shit. They don't want to talk about it. They want to stay in the bubble. They want to stay in the mainstream comfort zone and don't want to challenge any of the realities. The extension of this is defending those synthetic realities like the globe model, like the university system. All of this shit, the technology, garbage, it's brainwashing. It's the manifestation of cancer on the spiritual level. If you have zero connection with spirit, with your spirit, or even understanding what the definition of that is. What the fuck is a soul? What is all this stuff? That is me, that is not this physical dense body. What is that? Where's all this information and intuition and beauty coming from if it's not manifesting out of your fatty brain tissue, if it's not manifesting out of the bacon double cheeseburger that you ate earlier today. Because there is an energy that's manifesting out of that bacon double cheeseburger that you ate earlier today. And just think about what kind of energy is coming out of that shit. It's fucking dead. It's nasty. It's parasitic. Take a microscope onto a fucking pork chop and see what comes out of that shit. Pour some Coca-Cola on a pork chop and look at it under a microscope. I did this shit in high school. And I actually stopped eating pork right after I did that in high school. But my family didn't do that. And when my mom came home with a slab of pork chops and she fried them up, and I was like, God damn, that shit smells good. 16-year-old me was just like, yeah, okay, well, I'll be grown up and whatever. And that's how far this program goes on an adult scale. We're eating parasitic programs. We're eating death. We're eating this dead energy and calling it life. But because we're so strong and so resilient, we can do that. We can turn this energy into something, because we are the manifestations of the deepest dark and the lightest of the lightest light. As the living bridge, having that potential of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And this mind control program, this colonial agenda, knows that. So they know they can sell you a fucking parasite and put a bow on it and say that it's good. And tell you that this is a $365 piece of cow meat. This is a $12,000 pork chop. Come into our restaurant where we dress fancy. And you have to dress fancy to eat flesh, to eat a parasite. Come on in. Cancer. If you're separated from your soul, then you're separated from the soul of nature. You're separated from the soul of other beings. So psychologically, you will allow yourself to allow your body to eat that being, to eat that essence, to eat that soul, that dead soul energy. Starts at the soul, goes to the mind, then the body. This is how cancer works. Starts at the soul, then to the mind, then to the body. We are in a cancerous soul program. And this is what this system is based upon. And they don't give one fuck about you. I don't give a shit what they're dressed in. If they're wearing a fucking tie, that's a noose. That's this program. Death and destruction is the intelligence of this program. And best believe there is an intelligence. That obviously they can use it. This is what's happening right now. Artificial intelligence, synthetic intelligence, all subcategories to destructive intelligence. When you realize that the creative intelligence is the organic intelligence that manifests from the Most High Spirit to your spirit essence, your spirit relationship to this, to this reality. And your ancestors were tapped into this shit. The colonial program doesn't want to look at history, because then it will look at the very fact that everything, every single thing at its essence, when you realize, first of all, who are the original people? This is well known already. I don't even have to say it. So if you know that, then you know that everything was first originated from the melanated people. This is why the colonial agenda doesn't want to look at any history, because it will have to look at itself. And if the system, this supremacy system, is scared to look at itself, what the fuck do you think the individuals who are privileged within that system are going to do? The same fucking thing. Not look at themselves, and in fact celebrate looking at themselves from a limited foundation, from a limited perspective. This is what this whole industrial age, new world order, new age order is based upon. Creating a foundation on liquefaction, on nothing. Setting a foundation on air, emptiness. And since there's so much garbage floating on that ocean, people now build like these artificial islands. You can build a military base on an artificial island. That artificial island of the colonial program is built on cancer, separation from spirit, the genocide, the massacres, the supremacy program as a whole. And this mind control program of this system is the military base being built on top of that. And they will never tell you this shit, because it will take the fucking legs right out of the system as a whole. And people are scared of that shit because they don't know what's on the other side. They don't know what's on the other side. In fact, they don't want to even know what's on the other side because we've been so comfortable. Your parents have been so comfortable. Your grandparents. And not only comfortable, but beat down on that whipping post, literally, to worship this system. Worshipping this system more than you even understand who the fuck you are. In fact, worshipping this system because you don't know who you are. So you need to know something. This is why people get such a big ass ego when they go into the university system and get all these degrees or get a big ass good job or something like this. Oh, they change. That's what this whole thing about changing is. When their ego changes, when they get that managerial job, when they get that degree, they changed. You know why they changed? Because they started to worship that program. They worshiped that synthetic reality and started to adopt who they are, adapt who they are, who they were, to a cancerous system. And nobody says they change for the better overall, when that's not a well-known thing. It's always they change for the worse when they get into this system. Why? Because this system is empty. So it creates empty people. All the way up. Empty ass people. Empty managers. Empty men. Empty women. Empty souls. Empty everything. Because people are too fucking afraid to look at history, first of all. Too afraid to look at our story, her story, the soul story, natural stories, all one story. But people won't look at that story because, first of all, our attention spans is fucking just blown to shit. There's no attention span. And even if you had an attention span, people's egos are so huge, they just automatically start to defend and fight some shit. But that's how people learn. I used to think like that too. I used to do that. I'm not saying this from outside in. I'm saying this from the inside out. I've done this shit. That's the only way I could speak on this shit, because I went through that program. I went through talking about the new age to people, talking about, oh yeah, this is this, and then I realized how fucking empty that shit is. I was out there protesting in the Occupy and even at the Black Lives Matter stuff in Oakland and San Francisco, until I realized how deeper this story goes beyond that shit, including that shit, but beyond that. And our potential exists in that beyond space. And if I didn't challenge myself to go there, then how the fuck am I going to ask anybody else to go there? And where is there? We're constantly on that journey. So until we start addressing every single perspective that this synthetic reality is based upon, this synthetic pillars, these synthetic foundations are based on, we're going to be setting ourselves up for failure. Trump is a giant distraction to set people up for failure. This is why they're coming out with this fake and real news shit. Because they need to say what is fake. So this is the double hand shit. You already know that shit, the mainstream is fake. All that fucking emptiness, Kim Kardashian, Kanye West, it's all empty. And Trump ain't no different from that. But when Trump is lumped in with the people, the so-called opposition to the real news, which is actually the fake news, so this is a little confusing. He's the opposition. You know where I'm coming from, though. He's the opposition. He's tied up with Alex Jones. That's the controlled opposition that's supposed to look fake to the so-called real system, but is actually talking about some real shit. The only thing, their realness still exists in a bag of shit. Because that realness, which is called fake by the so-called real system, is based on limitation and fake superhero-ness. Because they got the fake villain of the mainstream media calling them the globalists and all this other shit to make them the superhero. Not saying that they're not part of the system. What I'm saying is that they are glorified as the villain out in your face with these outlets like alternative news and aggressive progressives and the so-called conspiracy theorists and Alex Jones InfoWars and all this shit to validate, not so much to make them look like the villain. That's already well known. It's to make the system look like the superhero from within the system. All distractions, all of it. And Trump represents that the pinnacle. He represents the tip of the iceberg of that distraction. And you just keep focusing on whatever comes out of that cattle prod that he is. And Twitter and the internet and all these fucking interviews and all this shit is just the cattle prod. The late night talk shows, they give you that in-between mentality, and they get Samantha Bee out there talking about, like, telling her perspective as if it's the only perspective. This totally, they get you caught up in this liberal and conservative shit, and you don't ever question the reality of the entire system. So you just need to join a team because you don't want to look at yourself. It's easy to join a fucking team. It's harder to look at yourself and see where you come from. See where this system comes from. Old school, younger generations, it don't fucking matter. I've seen young people with YouTube channels with tens of thousands of subscribers calling themselves conservatives. Black women conservatives backing Donald Trump. This is the most asinine fucking thing I can imagine. I can't even paint that shit. I couldn't even fucking imagine that shit. But it exists. Not only does that mentality exist, but there's hundreds of thousands, possibly even millions of people who think on that vibration and follow that kind of shit. And it's not their fault. This is not about blame. This is about just telling it like it is, how I see it. This is a universal spiritual warfare, a cancerous program on every level. And the mentality of the system is to keep you trapped in that box. This is what Trump represents. This is who Trump really is. This is who Obama really is. Obama just represents the intellectual version of Trump. A black intellectual, so-called black intellectual individual slave, profiting off of the system, profiting off of the blood, sweat, and tears of the melanated people, of the indigenous people, of the Aboriginal people across the earth plane. This is why they gave that dude the Nobel Peace Prize a few months into his first year in office. Because they knew they were about to do more fucking damage with him being in that seat as the sedative that he is and was. They knew they were going to do so much fucking damage with him being there that you had to keep playing that program in your head. Peace, peace, peace. He's got the Nobel Peace Prize. Peace, he represents peace. Then you got Leonardo DiCaprio talking at the United Nations. He's the international messenger of peace. All this peace talk. You can't have physical peace if people are psychologically at war with themselves and each other. You can't have psychological peace if people are spiritually at war with themselves and each other. It's an absurdity to think otherwise. And Donald Trump represents that ignorance to keep you locked in to the the physical reality, the dense materialistic realm, and not question anything that led up to the so-called powers that be. Not question anything outside of what's universally accepted from that system, by that system, all the way up into your neck, the way you have a relationship with nature itself, the earth plane, humanity. They have to this is what the university system is. It creates a fucking universe. You are in the colonial universe. If you think you evolved from a monkey, if you think you evolved from an amoeba from the Big Bang to a fucking brontosaurus, to you are in the colonial universe. If you call yourself a color, an African American, or whatever the fuck else they tell you you are to check in that box, creating universes of limitation. And I'm not being too extreme about this. Proof of this is how many people totally disregard the fact that you have dreams, that you dream at all, that you have any connection to a spirit. This is why people are having this is why the atheist program is getting so involved right now, because people have bought so much into the materialistic realm that they just said, oh yeah, well shit, I'm just what science tells me I am. I'm just a fucking garbage dumpster for Whopper Juniors and bacon egg cheese sandwiches. That's all my life is about. So yeah, there is no God. There is no essence. I don't have a spirit. I'm just a meat suit. And when I die, I don't know. I guess I'll be buried and I'll be stuck there. Like Beetlejuice. I'll just be a ghost. So when people think that they are ghosts when they die, then you're actually a ghost when you're alive, before you die. So until people realize make their connections to the soul and to the spirit before you die, then you'll be a fucking ghost. You won't have any understanding of, not saying that this reality has more influence over your spiritual essence when you do leave this space. What I'm saying is that there is a recycling program that is going on in this system. This is a testing ground. You're never disconnected from your soul. You're never disconnected from the Most High Spirit. But you are on a journey. The spiritual you, the essence, the soul you is on a journey. And if the journey, the challenges within that journey overtake your understanding of your soul essence, conscious and subconsciously. This is why I said your dream state is your subconscious. So the majority of people don't even dream. A lot of people say they don't dream, which is a fucking ignorant ass thing. It's like saying, I don't subconscious. I said that in a previous video. I don't subconscious. What the fuck you mean you don't subconscious? You don't dream. Of course you fucking dream. It's just you're so distracted by this materialistic realm that you aren't aware of your dreams. Because you've replaced them, knowingly or unknowingly, largely unknowingly because this system is so thick, you've replaced them with the physical reality. This is why children lose touch with their dreams around 5 to 7 years old, because they've bought into the physical reality. When they go to kindergarten and first grade and second grade and they're waking up real quick and they just only want to be a part of this reality and completely separate themselves from their spiritual nature, their subconscious, and all that other stuff. And they start to buy in to what their parents bought into and what their parents start to indoctrinate them with and what the public education system starts to condition themselves with. So they separate you from your subconscious, and you're locked into the conscious reality, and then you're locked into the synthetic version of the conscious reality outside of the harmonics of nature, which is this colonial universe. And they tell you, oh, you're this and you're that. You're not this, you're that. Oh, you think you're that? Yeah, whatever, you're actually this. Oh, well, if you look like that, then you must be this. And then people start believing that shit over and over and over again. They believe whatever somebody else tells them they are, if they have that authority, largely from just what they look like. This is what the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus program is a part of, and why people are trying to look like something that they're not. Completely bass-ackwards from the soul, the mind, and the body. That's what this system is based upon. This is what it's based. This is what Trump represents. A totally ass-backwards, bass-ackwards ass individual, human being. Totally. Who he is not who he is. Who he is, or who he thinks he is based upon the genocide, the massacres of this system. Who he is openly, what you see on television when he's speaking, when he's talking about make America great again, who he is who he thinks he is based upon who he's been told to be